Hi, this is Joe Barton sitting in for Paula Gloria, who's in the control room. Paula's the brains of this outfit. I'm just here to look pretty. And tonight, this is further down the rabbit hole. And tonight we have a guest with us, Karen Hudes. And we like to go into topics more deeply here. And Karen is a whistleblower for the World Bank. And let's hear it out there in television land for whistleblowers. We need more whistleblowers. And I'd like Karen to tell us a little about herself. Karen, would you tell my viewers a little about yourself?
Thank you, Joe, and thanks for having me. I'm called the World Bank Whistleblower. I worked in the legal department of the World Bank for 21 years, and I'm also an economist. What I blew the whistle on was corruption. When I blew the whistle, I was just following the rules of a lawyer, because the World Bank is a bank at the very center of the international financial system. And I saw corruption, and I knew that it was my job to fix the corruption. Unfortunately, what it turned out was that the corruption that I was blowing the whistle on was world corruption. And I've been working together with other whistleblowers both inside the World Bank and whistleblowers who are reporting the corruption that's been damaging our international system. We're now at a crossroads. We're at a crossroads both for the United States. I'm a United States citizen. We're also at a crossroads for the world. We're on the very edge of a currency war, but I'm happy to tell everybody that it's very likely that what we're going to get is rule of law. And the reason I can say this with accuracy is because the World Bank is many things, but it's also a knowledge bank. There are 188 countries that belong to the World Bank. It's like a cooperative. And what has happened at the World Bank is that there is a group that's been secretly hiding. It didn't want anybody to find out about that group. But it turns out that a lot of people have been working together, and we've got a very good idea of where the corruption is coming from and what we have to do to take back our countries and to take back the world for humanity. And we're just about there. And so that's why I'm so glad that we have this opportunity.
And I normally don't use questions, but this was such an important interview that I got a lot of questions that I wanted to ask and to cover on this. Do you know of other whistleblowers? Who are the other whistleblowers that are involved and maybe with you?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you about the World Bank whistleblowers. There's a wonderful woman in Scotland, Elaine Colville, and the two of us have gotten 3 statements up on the UK Parliament website. As soon as we did that, a very accurate power transition model started predicting that there was a 90 to 95% chance that the world was going to have a rule of law. So that's one of the whistleblowers. Another one, some of the whistleblowers don't want public recognition. We have one of them in our studio, and he'll be speaking later on tonight. But we're all reporting the same thing. There's a whistleblower from Mexico, there's one from South Korea, there's one from India, there's one from Ethiopia. We're all reporting that the money at the World Bank cannot be properly accounted for, because anybody that reports the corruption that they find gets fired without recourse.
Wow. What exactly was the cover-up?
Well, what I first reported was a project in the Philippines around the year 2000. And what happened was the man who owned Philippine Airlines was in default to the second largest bank. And what happened was he bought up the shares of the bank. And I told the man who was in charge of the lending program that we wouldn't be able to disperse the loan. And so what happened was I was reassigned. You can't reassign a lawyer who's trying to fight corruption. And so I went to my boss, and Then my boss didn't see it my way, so I went to the board, and the board and I met with Jim Wolfenson, who was then the president of the World Bank, and Jim Wolfenson's response to the corruption. By the way, what happened in that project was the bank ended up with a bank run. The people who had their money on deposit withdrew their money, and the government had to bail out the bank for $500 million. And then we didn't disperse our loan for $200 million. And then the Japanese had a loan for $200 million, and they had to cancel that loan. That's $900 million worth of bad loan. And the World Bank said that the World Bank performance on that loan was satisfactory. That's a cover-up to the board. You can't have a cover-up in a bank. And so when I tried to get the cover-up to end, that's when things went from bad to worse. I ended up going to the Treasury Department, and when I went to the Treasury Department, I told them that the German government had said that the people on the board were being treated like mushrooms. They were kept in the dark and covered with fertilizer. There are 25 different board members. The biggest 8 countries of the world have their own executive director. That's the United States, Germany, France, Russia, who am I leaving out? Saudi Arabia, China, and the rest of the countries share an executive director. And these executive directors are resident. They stay, and they're supposed to manage the board. But there's a convention which says that the board will just vote whatever the president of the World Bank proposes, up or down. And once the corruption was being covered up, I told the board that they should no longer be a rubber stamp. And that was when I was locked out of the World Bank. So when I went to the Treasury Department, what I told them was that there was a very accurate power transition model that said that if the United States didn't stop covering up things from the board, that we were going to lose the ability to just handpick the president of the World Bank. That was called the Gentleman's Agreement. The World Bank is a sister organization of another institution which is called the International Monetary Fund. And that's right across the street from the World Bank. That's usually, up until 2010, it used to be that the European countries could simply handpick the managing director of the IMF. But both the Gentleman's Agreement for the IMF and for the World Bank ended in 2010 because of this corruption that didn't end. What happened was the United States lost its leadership. This power transition model is extremely accurate, and it's predicting that if the corruption that we're reporting does not end, the whole world is going to have a currency war, because the corruption, it turns out, was not in the World Bank, it was in the world.
What do you think's wrong with the international financial system?
That's the corruption I'm talking about.
And who's to blame?
I'll tell you who's to blame. There are layers within layers. Do you remember when John F. Kennedy had his speech about secret societies?
Yes, I remember that well.
Okay, so it's the secret societies. It's the Knights of Malta. It's the Masons, yes. And when you keep peeling the onion, you go in, we're going down the rabbit hole now.
Right.
There's a group of companies that own the banks, the Federal Reserve Board, and there's a study of exactly what kind of control they've grabbed. Do you remember Bernie Madoff? Yes. Yep. That was not a one-off operation. The securities regulators are just giving a green light because this group, it's one group. People think there are 10 banks, you know, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Citibank, right. Union Bank. No, Deutsche Bank. They are actually all one bank. What this group did was there's a very accurate study by the Federal Institute of Technology. They looked at the ownership of the 43,000 companies that are traded on the stock markets, and there's the same board members go from one company to another. So they've magnified their power 10 times. They own 40% of the assets of the publicly traded companies. They pull down 60% of the earnings, and they think they're above the law. And they're not above the law. They're absolutely not above the law.
Well, why hasn't the legal system brought these people in, and what's wrong with our legal system?
The lawyers, that's what's wrong with the legal system. The lawyers are all complicit, and what they've done is they've set up, what can I say? It's like a mafia of lawyers, and any lawyer that doesn't join that mafia finds themselves without a practice. And we went, for example, in my case, because I bought a World Bank bond, I wasn't going to just roll over and play dead, because I knew about this corruption from the political scientist who came to the World Bank in 2004. And he said, Karen, we have 5 years to prevent a nuclear war in the Middle East. So remember Syria? That was the nuclear war that we prevented. So in any event, what's going on with the legal profession is that the lawyers come up with gobbledygook language to fool everybody. And then when lawyers go in front of other lawyers to be disciplined, the Board of Professional Responsibility, those lawyers give a free pass to the ones that are connected with that group of banks that I was telling you about, that cartel. So for example, when the lawyers at the World Bank took whiteout and falsified the documents in my case, I bought a World Bank bond. So that meant that the courts could not prevent me from suing the World Bank. I sued the World Bank. I sued the World Bank's auditor, KPMG. And the courts, it turns out, we think the federal courts are courts of equity. That means that you can go and ask to be protected by the Constitution. Guess what? It's a big charade. When you go in front of the federal courts, you're really going into an admiralty court. Did they bother to tell you? No. What happened was the lawyers, they used fancy language to prevent people from finding out. There's a second constitution in the United States where each and every state has been turned into a corporation, and they've incorporated the United States of America. It sounds like I'm making this up. I wish I were, but I'm not.
No, most of the people that have followed our show have heard a lot of what you're saying from us. We've talked about the lawyers and how the courts are corrupt. I've done many shows on the lawyers on lawyers and judges as criminals. So you're going to ring right with our audience. But can you tell us what's wrong with what's going on with the financial market in the United States?
Well, the first thing I think people should look at is the precious metals traders, because they're the ones, you know, as I started getting more and more publicity, because the first thing that these crooks did was they bought up all the mainstream media so that they could keep everybody ignorant. This is, you know, and so for the first, I was fired in 2007, but I kept going, and finally, I teamed up with a whistleblower named Mark Nowitzki. Mark didn't have anything to do with the World Bank. He was working for a company called Teletech, which has been doing domestic spying on American citizens. So Mark showed me where the alternative media was. And so your question about what's being covered up, just about everything's being covered up. We're being totally misinformed about everything that we need to know as citizens. And so our hands are tied behind our backs. We don't know, many of the people that simply depend on the mainstream media don't know what's going on. They're deliberately kept in the dark.
Yep. Well, we've a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, we've actually done quite a few shows on, and we've covered a lot of the same ground with different people. Raja, we had him on the scams that they've run on the repossessions of the houses. Over 14.5 million homes have been repossessed by the banks in this country, and we had Rod Class on, who you did a radio show with Rod, so. You know a lot about. I hope you know a lot about what Rod's been doing. Rod's been fighting a lot of legal battles, but I'd like to get back to What is important about the money and currency system that our audience needs to know?
Well, I didn't finish the question about what's wrong with the markets and about the currency market in particular. We're we're being robbed blind by our money system. It's not a proper money system. The Federal Reserve was put in place in 1913 by stealth. All of the members of Congress, most of them, had gone home. And that was what Woodrow Wilson said on his deathbed, that was his worst mistake, that he had just sold this country downstream. So what's wrong with our currency market is that we are paying interest on our debt. That's not the way it needs to go. Normally, what you should have is you should have the debt issued, not the debt, the currency issued by the Treasury Department. And this is what John F. Kennedy had done. He had signed a memorandum. It was called the Green Hilton Agreement, the word Hilton because it was in the Hilton Hotel. And 2 weeks later, he was murdered because the banks want to earn interest. What happens is the Treasury Department now issues a promissory note to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve then simply prints money on paper. It's not backed by anything. It used to be in 1970, it was backed by gold. And then, because we had the war in Vietnam and the Great Society payments, we were not able to redeem the dollars for gold anymore. So right now, it's not backed. It's just paper currency. It's called fiat currency. It's called fractional reserve because for every dollar that the bank has something, a loan backing it up, it's going to issue 10.
Yep.
$10. And so, and then now what the banks are doing, the Federal Reserve, is they've got something called quantitative easing. They just invent funny words to try to keep people out. Remember, we were talking about lawyers. The idea is gobbledygook. They come up with a fancy word. It's just simply printing dollars, like there's no tomorrow. And that's what's actually, they were deliberately trying to crash the dollar. They were deliberately trying to crash the dollar because they thought what they were going to do was they were going to have a single world currency. But that didn't get off the drawing board because there's something called the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And those countries decided that they weren't going to let this corruption continue. And they are going to start their own development bank. That's now on the drawing boards. And right now, they're no longer trading in dollars. That's 25% of world trade. So the dollar is not going to be in its strong position anymore. I have been actually in touch with the Defense Department about this. When Chuck Hagel was a senator from Nebraska in 2008, I spoke to him about the risks that we had with all of this corruption. And I showed him this model, and I said we were headed right to a currency war. I said we couldn't continue this cat and mouse game. So the very first thing I did when he became the Secretary of Defense was I went to the Defense Department with that power transition model. They know how accurate it is. I spoke to the person who was managing that model, and I said, are we going to allow the U.S. dollar to crash and burn? Are we going to stand by as this country becomes a wreck? Is this where we're headed? And I had been writing the Department of Defense, and I asked General Dempsey during the, he had a town hall meeting on the 2nd of December. I asked him, I said, what on earth are you doing as the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff if you're not protecting our dollar? Because when I was talking about gold, it turns out that these crooks have taken, and they know this, they've taken all the world's gold. It's much more gold than people think. And there's 170,500 metric tons of gold in the Bank of Hawaii. And the person who's got the legal signature authority for this gold has said that they want a strong dollar, and they're willing to let the people of the United States have this gold, back our currency, have the currency issued by the Treasury Department. There are uncut dollars that are just waiting to be issued. And people need to know this, because the person who's got the legal signature authority for issuing these dollars has given us the permission to issue these dollars. Why aren't they being issued? And that was what I asked General Dempsey. I said, if you're trying to have a strong country and that's your job, why aren't you doing your job? That's what I asked him. And that's what everybody that's listening
What was
to this
his answer?
He didn't answer the question. But I'll tell you, Veterans Today featured my question at the very top of their article on his town hall meeting. And the reason why it's just the difference between having a strong country and having a weak country is if enough people understand what I'm saying. And there's a very good way to get this accomplished. And that's because there's something called Article 5 of the Constitution. Remember, there were two constitutions, the one that the lawyers tried to hide. Why did the lawyers try to hide that second constitution? I didn't answer your second question completely when you were asking me who's the corruption. I was talking about these companies.
Right.
But there's an entity that owns these companies, and that's the Vatican and the Jesuits. They're the ones that have been orchestrating all of this. What happens when you pay your interest to the Federal Reserve? Because don't forget, when you pay your taxes, you send your tax return one place and you send your check to the Federal Reserve. What do they do with the money? I'll tell you. They take the money and they send it to London.
England, right.
Right. Why do they send it to London? People thought we won the Revolutionary War. No, we didn't. People thought, you know, when they came in 1812 and burned down the Capitol, they thought that was all settled. No, it wasn't settled. So the money, we never became free of the colonial ties to the United Kingdom. They forgot to tell the American people what was going on. And if you think that I'm getting it backwards, one of the documents that I have up on my website, there were some patriots in North and South Carolina that went and looked at their records in the State House. And they found out that all of the governors, except for one, have been lawyers. So that what would happen is when the governors would be elected, they would give them this information that there were actually two constitutions. Anyway, so in, I think it was 1996, some researchers in North and South Carolina went and looked very carefully through their state records, and they found out that, hey, this is a real rabbit hole. We don't have rights under the Constitution. We're being treated, when we go into a court, we're being treated like ships. We're not in a real court.
Right.
When your children are born, and they get a Social Security number, that they estimate how many taxes that child is going to pay over the lifetime. And this Federal Reserve corrupt banking system issues a bond, and they start earning money on the capital markets.
Right.
Treating people like ships. Did you ever? I mean, this is just abysmal.
We've covered many shows on this stuff.
So let's go back to the Article 5 of the Constitution.
All right.
Yes? Because it turns out that enough states have asked for a constitutional convention. And when we have the Constitutional Convention, if enough people know about how we have been swindled, and why shouldn't they know this? Why are we unable as a people to wrap our minds around this huge swindle? And here's the reason why I'm so convinced that it's not mission impossible, even though we're up against the fact that all of our mainstream media is owned by these crooks. It's because of our allies. Let's go back to Germany, and let's go back to talking about gold.
Yeah.
All right. Germany asked for its gold back from the Federal Reserve. Why was the Bank for International Settlements created? That was in 1930 to extract reparations from Germany. Germany has been watching these issues, and they are working with us, and they are giving us all the information. And they are absolutely convinced that we are going to get through. Yeah? And it's not just Germany. I mean, what happened to Russia? What happened to Russia was Yeltsin took all of the gold that was supposed to be for the Russian people and shipped it out of Russia. He was a crook. So what did Russia do with the Jesuits that tried to go there? I'm not going to tell you. Just do a little Googling. You'll find out in a year ago, October, what happened to the Jesuits that thought they they could go to Russia after all of their gold left Russia. And I've been on Russia Today TV 3 times, right?
I've seen those shows.
Yeah. Okay, so we have some pretty good allies. And that's the point about this stakeholder analysis. It predicted that all of the countries of the world would try to work together to get rid of this terrible corruption. And it's not just the people in the United States. It's just that they know that we've got our work to do. They're not controlling me. Nobody's ever controlled me. You should ask my family if anybody's ever controlled me. No, this is absolutely the American people holding hands together, and we are working with our allies, and we have erased these crooks. They are fired.
What do you think people should do to help get this done?
Anybody that is listening to this broadcast has got to get their family to understand. And, I know it's not easy because, look, I let it all hang out. My husband moved out. He didn't want to be part of this, we would have been married 25 years in February. It's not easy getting through, but you have to, because our country is on the line and our world is on the line. But it's a 95% likelihood that humanity will band together. All you have to do is sit down and read the documents. We've got all the documents there for you to read. I know it's in gobbledygook, the way the lawyers wrote it, but if you all work together, you can see what it is. I mean, the very first thing you read is the treaty in the 1200s where the United Kingdom gave away their country to Rome. That's where you start. And then you just follow the money.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, we've done shows about the Bar Association and how it's a criminal operation and how it takes its marching orders from England, and we've done shows on how the judges are so corrupt in this country and how the banking system is so corrupt. But what we need to do, in my opinion, is until we bring these criminals to justice, this is my opinion, that we should seize the assets of the criminals who stole all this money and return it. I tell people on a bunch of my shows, it's like a big vacuum cleaner. The guys on top are sucking all the money out of the people's pockets. All we need to do is arrest those guys and turn the vacuum cleaner on blow and send all that money back to where it was stolen from.
Well, I'll tell you what my take is on it, Joe. I have a different take. First of all, I think when you're talking about a vacuum cleaner, I like to think of, I think of a pipe system, but I like to think of water flowing through the pipes.
Yeah.
And what's the water? It's information. The very first thing we do is we just spread all the information so that people know what's what. Yeah?
Right.
And that cleans things out. So we're talking about information. And as part of that, I don't know how many of the whistleblowers are going to be involved in straightening out this mess, but I think we should be, because we've been on the inside, we know, and we're whistleblowers, so we want to get things right.
Right. And
so what you have to do is you have to, first of all, make sure that whistleblowers are going to be made whole. And that's what the U.S. Congress did. I reported to Congress what was going on. Senator Lugar wrote 3 letters to the World Bank saying, don't fire this lady. Then Senator Lugar, Leahy, and Bai asked for a Government Accountability Office audit, which the World Bank stonewalled. So when that happened, the World Bank went back to Congress and asked for a capital increase, and Congress said, we will not disperse the capital increase until the effects of retaliation against whistleblowers has been eliminated. So Congress, of course, Congress is in such contempt of the American people, because don't forget, the American people have asked for a constitutional convention, and Congress couldn't be bothered. And the Article 5 is very clear. Once 2/3 of the states have asked for a constitutional convention, there shall be a constitutional convention. So Congress fell down on the job as far as the Constitutional Convention goes, but they didn't fall down on the job with respect to the World Bank, because they knew, actually, they believed me when I told them about this power transition model and that the life of our country is at stake. So they did their job there. But anyway, so getting back to your question, what has to happen is, I don't think that we should take all the bankers and throw them in jail. Because don't forget, they're sitting on our gold right now. We need our gold. We have to. They're sitting on our dollars. We need our dollars. I think what we need to do is we need to be smart and strategic and sequence. And you know, like in the mafia, when you're trying to get the Don, you let the little ones go free so that they can point their finger. I think we need to let enough bankers go free that we can get our money. I think it should work this way. I think we should say, maybe all we need to worry about are the ones at the very top. If you let our dollars out, if you let our gold out, and for every day from today that it's taking them to follow the law, we worry about getting another banker. I think we should, at this point, give them the incentive. I think they should very quickly, because the dollars are not going to continue. The Federal Reserve notes are not going to continue. They're going to crash. I was in Argentina when their currency crashed. What happens every day? You double the price. You go to buy something, an orange, you have to count out thousands of dollars because it's worthless. It's paper. It's toilet paper.
Right.
And one of the other things that's facing us is the credit rating. Because, you know, when the Serious Fraud Office called up the Securities and Exchange Commission in 2010, and the Securities and Exchange Commission couldn't be bothered to answer the Serious Fraud Office, that was a very difficult thing. And that was, at that point, we were worrying about our credit rating. And a UK lawyer told me to start telling the credit rating agencies. So Standard & Poor, Moody, and Fitch Rating have had a front row seat into all of this corruption. And Standard & Poor lowered our credit rating already once. And what happened then was Eric Holder sued Standard & Poor. And the lawyer representing Standard & Poor said that lawsuit started and got very intense when Standard & Poor had lowered the U.S. credit rating. Guess what? There's a fourth credit rating agency now that's owned by Russia and China. Our credit rating is really, really, really going to tank if we don't get rid of this terrible corruption.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what to say. It's so bad. That's why I bring people like you on, and Rod Class and Raja, to get the word out to the American people. We still have a half hour here to go. What else would you like to tell the American people?
Oh, there's so much to tell people. I think the most important thing to tell people is that, people call up and they say, should I be worried? What should I do to protect my children? What should I do with my money? And I'm happy to say that you don't have to worry, because the chances that we take our country back are 90 to 95%. But the thing is, it's not going to happen automatically. The very first thing that people need to do is they need to be citizens. They need to inform themselves. Don't just take my word for it. You can look at my website, kahudes.net, and you'll see documentation. Everything that I've been telling you is there. And if you can't find what you're looking for, send me an email. There's a contact page on it. And talk to your friends, your family members. Get to understand it, because as we go forward, we are going to take our country back. But as we go forward, we're not just going to go on autopilot and end up in the same ditch. We have to do things differently. And the very first thing that you have to do differently is you have to stay with it. You have to see how things get fixed. You have to be informed. And, some of this stuff, it shouldn't be technical. As I told you, lawyers write legalese to keep people out. Go back to the lawyers. The one who invented the word gobbledygook, that was a lawyer. He got mad at his colleague, it was Melvin, and I forget Melvin's last name. He got mad at his colleague. He said, "Don't give me that gobbledygook," you know? And so don't accept the gobbledygook. Ask for people to make things clear to you, because the minute you're getting gobbledygook, you know they're hiding something. Don't let people hide things from you anymore. That's the very first thing, is get yourself informed, stay with it, and be active. And the other thing that people need to do is they need to, first of all, I'm optimistic, but a lot of people accuse me of being overly optimistic. I don't have any guarantees. So you should buy some precious metals just in case we don't get our act together before the Federal Reserve note crashes. And then you should also ask for the states to have a state bank like they have in North Dakota. So that's, you know, you have to work together. Go to your state legislature and make sure that they're on board with a convention which is going to look at this corruption, because, you know, some of these state legislators are in the corner writing rules so that the conference that to fix our Constitution, to take back our Constitution, won't do the trick. They're trying to game the thing. Don't let them do it. I mean, really, it's your Constitution, it's your rights. Don't let them take it away from you. That's, you know, that's part of it. But I mean, we can, I would be very happy to discuss a number of things. One of the things is people want to know, how did I get involved in being a whistleblower? What is it that, why did I ever do this?
Because you care about our country, you care about the world. That should be obvious.
Well, you know, that's an answer that you can give, but when I made the first step down this whistleblower road, I had no idea what kind of a rabbit hole I was going down. But I mean, I can tell you right now where we are, so that people are a little bit, I think their mind is at rest. And the best way to describe where we are is if you know the story about the Wizard of Oz, because Frank Baum, when he wrote that book, he had exactly what we're facing in mind. And he wrote the book as a children's book, but he really wrote it for adults. So the yellow brick road, that's gold. Now,
right.
I'm not saying that we should have a gold-backed currency, because there are problems with that. I'm saying that we need to have assets backing all of our currencies in the world, so that we don't have to pay interest on debt, which is how we got into this mess. The only time you want to pay interest on debt is if you're a banker and you want to steal money from people. So we don't want that.
Right.
But anyway, so getting back to the Wizard of Oz, the yellow brick road, that's gold. Toto, I like to talk about Toto because that's the whistleblowers. We've pulled the curtain back so you can see what it is. We were inside the World Bank. We saw what was going on, and now we're telling you. And it's, you know, there's a whole group of us.
And the straw man was what they bring us into court as, the straw man?
No. The straw man is agriculture, the agriculture interests in the United States. The tin man, that was industrial interests. Now, who was the wizard? That's our favorite folks, the bankers. And who's the projection screen? That's the mass media.
Right.
And, you know, people should know, a lot of times, now that I'm getting more and more in the public eye, people are saying, well, you know, if Karen were for real, she wouldn't have gotten that much publicity. But I have to say, go back and look at the chronology, because for the first 5 years, I didn't know what was what. I didn't know the ropes. I didn't know that the mainstream media wasn't going to tell my story, because they were all owned by the bankers. So, and you know, even in the alternative media, you have to know who's who and what's what. So, for example, Reddit, that was started by Adam Schwartz. And then, you know what happened to him. He suicided himself. After he won, he suicided himself. And then Condé Nast bought Reddit. So what did Reddit do? They ran an article on me, just one. A lot of people had a lot of questions. And when I tried to go and answer the questions, they wouldn't let me do that. So that's, you know, that's one form of alternative media. Owned by Condé Nast? No, it likes to present itself as if it's alternative media. It's not alternative media. So, I mean, it's been quite an existence. But many whistleblowers have had their lives taken away from them. One whistleblower, you know, what they do with men, in particular bright men, is there's going to be a divorce and they're not going to be able to get to see their children. There's one of, you know, they do what they can to destroy your credibility in your life. One of the things that happened to me, talking about destroying credibility, and then you can also see how the whistleblowers are working together as a network. Somebody asked me if I wanted to be on a joint conference call. And so I did that. And then one of the people on the conference call was telling me about the planet Nibiru, and said that Ison was Nibiru. And, you know, I just repeated that the next day. And one of the whistleblowers, Mark Nowitzki, said, Karen, you've been had. And so I retracted it. And then somebody went through the internet and scrubbed every retraction so that they could say I'm totally confused. And it's true, I was confused. But now what we've decided is that when we get into information that's not absolutely credible and sourced, I'm not going to be talking about that. I'm going to be more circumspect so that I manage not to discredit myself. And we're a team, you know, and people are sending me information, and as a team, we're evaluating it.
Yeah. Well, I actually would like to ask. We have a friend in China who asked me to ask a few questions. Is BIS, the Bank of International Settlement, a ruling body or a banking body? If it's a ruling body, there is little meaning to improve the bank rules. Is the rule of law not the rule of law?
I'll tell you about the Bank for International Settlements.
All right.
They like everybody to think that the banks, the central banks that are members of the BIS, there's 60 of them, that's somehow a private, a public entity. No, it's private. It's these crooked banks that are stealing interest and driving all of these countries deeper and deeper into debt. So that's what the Bank for International Settlements is. And, you know, they started in 1930, as I said, to collect war reparations. What they do is they create wars. They create dissension. They're the ones that are dividing all the people so that they can divide and conquer. There isn't a more corrupt, abysmal place on this planet than the Bank for International Settlements. That's who they are.
All right.
I like them, you can see.
He also asked me to ask you, is the rule of law you mentioned in the interview with Greg Hunter being done only at top levels? What is your opinion of the rule of law for the public?
Okay, let me tell you what I like about the rule of law and what it should be. And that is actually the highway that we are on. That's the road that we are using as all of the people in the world to take back our planet. Because I've been using the securities laws. I bought a World Bank bond, remember?
Yeah.
So that means I'm entitled to accurate financial information. Now, am I getting accurate financial information? You better believe I'm not. Because anybody inside the World Bank that tries to correct inaccurate financial statements gets fired. For example, there was an auditor who reported that the interest was being overcharged on the World Bank borrowers. We weren't doing the calculations right. So he got fired, right? And there were a series of hearings that Senator Lugar held, and then they had a requirement that there should be independent arbitration for World Bank whistleblowers. That never happened, okay? So when you don't have accurate financial statements, any regulator, anywhere, because the World Bank has $180 billion worth of bonds all over the world's capital markets. So I went to all of the state attorneys general, and I said, you have to do your job. You have to protect the bondholders in your states. I've been writing them and, you know, demanding that they do their jobs. So that's the states. And, you know, I've been telling everybody, when the attorneys general didn't do their jobs, I went to the governors. Then when the governors didn't do their jobs, you know, I was writing on Facebook, one of the people in one of the states, I won't say which one it was, said, my house has been taken from me. They even killed my dog, you know, to intimidate me. I mean, these people are nasty.
Yeah.
Right? And she said, and then when I tried to correct things, she said, the records of the entire street where my house is got erased. She said, how can that be? I said, you know, you've got a point. We've got a problem. So this was in July, and I was busy because I had been arrested. I was going to tell you, I had been arrested illegally, but that's a different story. Anyway, so I was busy trying to defend myself from the district attorney in the District of Columbia. And so somebody had written in, and he said, I can get a lot of stuff out, you know, using the social media. I said, great. I said, have everybody call their county executive. We need to take this to the county level. And so there was a meeting in San Antonio, and lo and behold, my county executive, Ike Leggett, was elected as the president of the County Executives of America. So let me tell you about how I was arrested. The World Bank meets every 6 months. All of the ministers of finance come to these meetings. So at the meeting in April, first of all, I wrote to the Judge Traxler, who was the chair of the Judicial Conference, which oversees all of the federal courts, because they, you know, what they did on my case, I told you I sued the World Bank and KPMG. Well, this judiciary did a really poor job. 188 ministers of finance reinstated me, and the clerk couldn't be bothered to take notice of that fact. He ignored it, which was a problem. Yes, it was a serious problem. So I wrote to the Chief Justice, Justice Roberts, and I said, we seem to have a problem here. We're ignoring 188 countries. Could you correct the problem? And he couldn't be bothered to correct the problem. So before the meeting in April, I wrote to the chair of the executive committee of the Judicial Conference, and I said, you know, I'm going to be going to this meeting in April, and I don't know what to say to 188 countries. It's kind of embarrassing. You know, why don't we correct this problem? And he couldn't be bothered to correct the problem. So I got admitted into the meeting, and then it's a 3-day meetings. The second day, the Secret Service wouldn't let me go in. I said, but here's my badge. I've been given a badge by 188 countries. Is the Secret Service able to rescind the admission badge that was given to me by 188 countries? They wouldn't let me in anyway. So I showed them the letter that I had written to the Secretary of Defense. I said, we're going to have a currency war. You can't do this. You can't ignore 188 countries, can you? And yes, they thought they could. So that's where it is now. I mean, is the United States going to ignore 188 countries? And let me get back to Germany. I told you I'd been on Russia Television Today. A website that has 1.5 million readers in Germany interviewed me. And there was a question there that they wanted me to address. It was a military helicopter flew over our consulate in Frankfurt. They flew 60 feet over the consulate. They broke all the dishes in the consulate, and they wanted me to explain what that helicopter was doing over our consulate.
Trying to send a message.
Yes, they said it was a shot across the bow. Now, Germany, I don't think we want them as our enemy. I think we want them as our ally. They're, you know.
Yes.
Yes, so that's where we are. I mean, that's where the situation is. I think we're in good shape, actually. Don't you?
Well, I think unless we get the criminals that are causing all this under control, I think we're in for big trouble. But if the American people wake up and enough people put the heat on to bring about the change that needs to be brought about, then I think we're in good shape. I think it's all in the hands of the American people.
But it's also, you have to think about it in terms of sequencing, Joe, because if these bankers are the ones that have our dollars and are the ones that have to release our gold, there has to be an incentive.
Right.
Right? We can't. It's not like we're going to have the Russians attack the banks. No. I mean, this is not how it's going to work. It's got to be done peacefully. It's got to be done through rule of law. And so the best thing we can do is we can say the bankers who are going to do the right thing now when we need them the most, and we do need them the most, and we should take that into account in clemency. I mean, that would be my recommendation.
Well, I see it a little different. I think that a lot of these people have committed treason against the United States, and when you think about 14.5 million families have been dispossessed from their homes, I don't think that deserves just a slap on the hand to these bankers. In my opinion, the ones who really caused it, I'm not saying every local banker, most of these local bankers don't have a clue. It's the big guys on top. And I think
that's exactly right.
The big guys on top need to be jailed and have their assets seized. For all that money that they've stolen should be seized, and they should be tried. And as far as I'm concerned, they've committed treason. They've committed crimes against humanity all over the world. They create wars. They create famine. These people should be brought to justice, and justice should be swift and harsh. We filled our prison. They have filled our prisons with nonviolent people, marijuana people, people where there's no victim. And they think nothing about all the lives that have been destroyed by their actions. You're much more forgiving on them than I am. I think they should be brought to justice. Their assets should be seized and returned to the people that it's been stolen from, and the people who've lost their houses through fraud should be able to get their houses back.
What it is I'm trying to be pragmatic. I'm not talking about justice with a capital J. What I'm talking about is being realistic about where we are and what we need to move forward. And we are not going to get what we need. And also, there's good news, which is there's a lot of gold available for the benefit of the people on this planet. But it's not going to be made available to them until we've come to some kind of, until the people that are in control of this gold let it go. And how are we going to get them to do this? That's the point. How are we going to get them to do this? And so I would say that, yes, there are some culpable individuals. I'm not saying everybody should be let off scot-free, but I'm saying that we have to do a calculus and let enough of the people in the banks that have been involved in this free so that they start, that they turn on those people at the top. And where is that going to happen? And how is it going to happen? And it should happen quickly. That's my concern. Because if we take too long, if we don't come to some accommodation soon, we're all going to go down together. And that certainly isn't what we want. We just have to be pragmatic.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what the future is going to bring. I'd like to ask a couple more questions from our friends in China. Our friends in China talk about a bail-in, which I had never heard of before. What would be the difference between a bail-in and a bail-out? What do you think about that?
Okay. The thing about bail-ins, this is what's going to happen if we can't get the gold that we're entitled to back our currency. When the currency crashes, the banks are going to claw back some of the money that people have deposited in the banks. But, you know, this is very dangerous, because what happens if people are worried about bail-ins and start taking their money out of the bank? It's going to lead to a panic. So I would say that what people ought to think about is just how accurate this power transition model is. It's 90 to 95% accurate. And it's predicting that we will have rule of law. So I don't think we're going to have a bailout or a bail-in. That's if we all do our jobs as citizens, and if we let the people know that we are completely informed about what the Federal Reserve is doing to our economy and doing to our currency. So I think we can get the job done. I'm optimistic we can get the job done.
Okay, I got another question from my Chinese friends. The Chinese yen has overtaken the euro in world trade, in trade finance. Most astonishing is the rate at which it happened last year. Chinese yen was only 1%, euro was 8%. Now the yen is 9%, and the euro has dropped to a bit more than 6%.
It's yuan.
What's that?
Okay, it's yen for Japan and yuan for China.
Oh, yuan, I'm sorry. Okay,
yeah.
yuan.
But the thing about China, you know, this power transition model, is China's going to have to be a little more patient with us. There's no question that their economy is going to grow. But if we have a peaceful transition, and if we work with our allies, and, you know, the American people are, we're a country that 75% of us want to work with other countries. We don't want to be a go-it-alone country. So if we do work together with the rest of the world, what we're going to have is we're going to have what they call Pax Americana. It's not going to be a country which goes out and attacks other countries like we did for Afghanistan or Iraq or I mean,
that's all we've been doing for the past.
No, we're not going to be that kind of country, because the people are going to make sure that the bankers that put us in wars, all of the wars have been bankers' wars.
Right.
Yeah, we're not going there, and so yes, China will come up, but it'll come up gradually over time, and we will be nestled with our allies in the rule of law. That's my scenario.
Okay, we're getting close to the end here. We only got a few, maybe about 30 more seconds. I'd like to thank Karen for coming here, and we're going to do other shows with Karen, and we're going to try to bring more information to you. As you know, the audience that knows us knows that that's what we're about, trying to get information out to the American people so that they can make informed decisions, and so that they know the truth, which they're not getting from the media. You're not getting it from ABC or CBN or any of the other media. It's the alternative media, and especially public access. And we ask all you people out there to support public access. So this is Joe Barton for Further Down the Rabbit Hole saying have a good night.